Hello and welcome to coverage of Grand Prix Houston. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Luis Scott Vargas. Luis, you're in the Hall of Fame.
That's true.
And as it turns out, the players that we're going to watch in this match are also in the Hall of Fame, both of them. This is Eric Froehlich versus Paul Rietzl. You can see that the names are swapped here. That's actually Efro on the right-hand side of the screen there. Both players at 9-1. And Luis, Eric is playing Dark Jeskai. Paul Rietzl's playing Bant Company.
Yeah, so we have a control versus aggro. Well, both these decks are mid-range, but Eric's is definitely more controlling. And then in the matchup, certainly Paul's going to have to take a slightly more aggressive bent. Just because Paul has, efficient creatures and cards that kind of help attack, like Collected Company, get more creatures on the board. And Eric has cards like Chandra and Soulfire Grandmaster that, like, over the course of a long game will give him an advantage.
Yeah, interesting to note here as well is that there are a couple of flavors of Bant Company floating around the tournament hall here. One of them has Eldrazi
They all taste
Sky
like cardboard, but yeah, there's many different flavors.
And more flyers. And the version that Paul Rietzl's playing is not that one, though. This one has Bounding Krasis and some more tempo kind of.
Yeah, he has that Deathmist Raptor. He's like leaning on the Megamorph kind of part. He also has like multiple Ojutized commands. A Yasova Dragonclaw.
Yeah, he has a singleton of that. He played that in we actually saw Paul last round as well.
Yeah, so Paul decided to go with, again, more individually powerful cards. Like Eldrazi Sky Spawner is a fine card. It won the last Modern Pro Tour, actually. But it's not in standard as individually powerful as something like, Bounding Krasis or Yasova Dragonclaw. It does have great synergy with Wingmate Rock. So Paul is giving up a little by not playing that. But Deathmist Raptor is also a great card. Deathmist Raptor is really good in an attrition battle, and I think part of the reason Paul has done well against Hardened Scales so far this weekend, which has kind of been a deck on a lot of people's radar, is that Deathmist Raptor does a great job of killing 7/7 Endless Ones.
For sure.
Also does pretty well against 6/6 Endless Ones and 8/8 Endless Ones, just in case that wasn't clear.
All right, Monastery Mentor here from Eric Froehlich. This is a nice addition as well, because one of the things that we'll see from Paul Rietzl's side is that his deck can play very, very, very tempo-oriented. He can use cards like Reflector Mage and Bounding Krasis to change the way a board state looks temporarily. He can also use Collected Company to find multiple copies of those cards. And a card like Monastery Mentor is one where if Eric gets to untap, he can start throwing a bunch of monks on the table, which looks like he's ready to make it rain monks here.
Yeah, this is Eric's best turn 3 play by far, because one of the ways to take advantage of, a Bant deck, look at Bant colors, they're not the best at killing creatures, and if you play a Mentor, if you can just tap out for Mentor on turn 3, which is so rare in this format, and then untap with it, yeah, Eric is going to just make at least 2 monks on his next turn, given what it looks like his hand is, with like a Painful Truce and a Fiery Impulse.
All right, well, Paul Rietzl's going to activate his Jace here.
And not going to
flip. Raptor.
I do like that combo.
Yeah, that's really nice. And here it is, Bounding Krasis to untap Jace, so he is going to flip Jace here.
Never mind.
This is cute.
Still,
ooh, another Raptor too.
And then plus Jace on the Monastery Mentor, presumably. I mean, that's always a good turn, but I still think Eric's turn here is going to be so much better.
It does feel like that, doesn't it?
Like, Painful Truce for 3, now have Spell Mastery, Fiery Impulse the Bounding Krasis, attack Jace for 2, have 2 monks in play. Draw 3 cards.
Not a bad response, and he's drawn 3 cards during this segment as well. Wow. Yeah, you got to like Froehlich's side of the scale here, and Fiery Impulse, thanks to the Dress and the Truth, does have
Eric
spell
demonstrating mastery here.
Indeed. Yeah, looks like he's going to get in for 2.
Yeah, like, I mean, Paul's just in a really deep hole here.
Yeah.
If he can have the time to play a face-down creature like a Den Protector and then flip it, getting back both Deathmist Raptors, that would be a pretty big swing. Getting 2 3/3 Death Touches into play for free is awesome. But the Monastery Mentor is such a fast clock. I mean, we've seen Mentor kind of do work across all the formats. It's actually one of the best creatures in Vintage.
Yeah,
and that's partially because it scales up so quickly, right? Last turn attack for 4 made 2 tokens. Next turn, if Eric plays 2 spells, attacks for 10 and has 2 more tokens.
Right.
It's just, it does not make the game last very long.
Here's a main phase Collected Company from Paul Rietzl here. He doesn't want to get this countered. Let's see what he hits.
Well, it's mostly that he wants to hit Reflector Mage even. That's the big win, because if he can bounce the Mentor before Eric can make tokens, then Eric can't recast it on the next turn, and Paul will be pretty happy with that turn of events. It looks like he's going to get a Krasis and a Death Mist Raptor, or he could get a Jace.
So not exactly what Paul was going for, but he's going to get some reasonable value here with a Jace and a Death Mist Raptor. Wow, this is really showing off the raw power of Monastery Mentor here, though.
Yeah, it's one of the most powerful cards. If it survives, it's a three mana creature that doesn't really protect itself, but if it survives, it just goes off. Eric going to play another card here. Looks like he's painful choosing in order to fuel the Mentor even more.
Okay, so stream is down. Okay. Is there a way to hardline it so that we can be screwed, but you can be doing something while I'm trying to fix this?
All right, so we're just going to keep trucking along. It looks like the stream may have fallen for us here. The internet's down, but not for the recording, so off we go.
That does not stop Paul from losing to Monastery Mentor, though.
No. Even the internet can't stop this.
Right, and the second copy of Painful Truths.
I mean, Eric had 6 cards in his hand when he went to his main phase this turn. He just cast another Painful Truths. Like,
well,
look at his hand.
One of the maneuvers we've seen frequently from Eric has been Painful Truths discard.
Yes, I saw that yesterday already.
Because of how many cards he tends to draw in turns 3 through 6.
We have seen him prioritize getting those Painful Truths down to make sure that his land drops keep coming, and then he kind of dumps a bunch of stuff onto the table later in the game.
And it looks like Eric's going to play a Jace. He really wanted to draw like a Murderous Cut or another Fiery Impulse here, but Jace Go is still pretty good. He ends up with a bunch of Mentors or Mentor tokens. They're not great on defense because when Eric can't play an instant, and Eric's tapped out, so he's not going to be able to. But Paul just has 1 3/3 in play. Eric can take 3, go to 9, and then next turn, between Jace being able to flashback something and Eric having a grip full of cards, it does make it pretty likely that he's going to get, I would say, 2 to 3 triggers. Maybe even if it's just 2, that's great, and the third trigger would be, just incredible.
So what about from Paul's side? He has the ability to flashback Collected Company right now. He's also got backup Jace on the battlefield.
Paul would love to hit a Reflector Mage, but I don't know. I think the damage might be done in some respects. Like, the game isn't over because Eric's last turn, he didn't end up attacking at all.
Mm-hmm.
But if you Reflector Mage as the Mentor, Eric can just play 2 spells and have 3 3/3 monks in play. And one of those spells is going to be a Fiery Impulse, which probably kills a blocker, which means that Eric's going to be able to make a pretty decent attack. I think Paul's best shot is probably to flashback the company, but it's not it's not going to hit that much that will stop Eric from achieving his game plan. Or it's just not going to hit that much. It looks like just a Reflector Mage.
Just a Reflector Mage, yeah.
Paul could actually bounce Eric's Jace here. That will stop a spell from being cast.
Kind of interesting.
But yeah.
In the interest of survival, he's going to take the Monastery Mentor instead.
It's pretty optimistic to hope that Eric doesn't have spells he can cast if you bounce the Jace.
After having drawn 6 extra cards this game, yeah.
So looks like Paul's going to flip his other Jace and end up with a Jace on 6, choosing to keep the new one.
He's got a couple of his one-ofs there. He's got his Yasova Dragonclaw.
Yeah, look, it's right there. It's in the graveyard.
Yeah, and he also has his Hidden Dragon Slayer in hand, which doesn't look too great against Eric's deck.
If it gets to the point where you can Hidden Dragon Slayer Monastery Mentor, you're not feeling great about things. So one of the monks gets shrunk.
No attack there from Paul. He just passes the turn back, and here comes Jace.
Eric
Look
actually
at Eric's hand.
Doesn't have a lot of spells, but he has a dig through time. So I think between that and the Jace, it's still going to be a good turn for him. Like, Eric can flashback dig, just cast dig and then flashback Fiery Impulse. He has to make sure to leave the Spell Mastery in the graveyard, which it looks like. So since he's 1 short, maybe he just Fiery Impulses first off Jace. He just -3 Jace. Fiery Impulse away, like. It actually could be Death Mist Raptor, even though it's kind of annoying if Paul ends up...
that would be the 3rd one in the yard.
Right, if Paul ends up flipping that could end up being pretty good. Eric, depending on how much he wants to plan out his turn without knowing what dig is going to hit, he could also end up in a spot where he plays the Soulfire Grandmaster before playing the Fiery Impulse just to gain the 3 life. So assuming Eric plays 2 spells, he gets to attack with 2 3/3 monks and a 1/3 monk, which will either kill Jace or the Reflector Mage, assuming that the Raptors are what gets Fiery Impulse. But because Eric cracked a fetch, he actually gets to just dig before deciding whether he wants to cast Impulse or not. Because dig plus Painful Choose will let him retain Spell Mastery. Eric found a Gideon, which is certainly one of the more powerful cards. And then more Painful Choose and Soulfire Grandmasters.
Yeah. Eric looks like he's kind of running away with this one, even though Paul's had reasonable plays at every stage here. He's cast 2 Collected Companies. He's got 2 Death Mist Raptors in the graveyard looking to come back. He's got an active Jace. Like, it's hard to ask for much more than that, but it feels like Eric has just overwhelmed him with cards from the get-go here.
Yeah,
and again, Monastery Mentor just dominating here.
Well, Eric has 4 Monastery Mentors and 4 Painful Truths, so his deck is just built to do this, and that's why we've seen him kind of consistently be casting these cards early. So they look really good in a field full of green-white decks. I mean, both those cards can be really powerful if your opponent is not pressuring you or killing your creatures.
Bzz.
So it looks like Eric is potentially not going to attack here. Interesting. So he killed the Reflector Mage over the Death Mist Raptor. Huh.
And he's potentially offering a trade here.
Yeah, I don't understand why he would do that, considering the Raptor is just going to be able to take out one of Eric's monks. Interesting. So Jace will survive if Raptor trades.
Every time you say that, I think you're talking about
Josh Otterlayton,
yeah.
yeah.
Like
So
Raptor trade.
So what Paul ended up doing was eating the 1/3 monk and letting Jace die to the 2/3/3 monks.
Okay.
So Paul untaps. Paul would really like to play that Dragon Slayer, but with only 4 lands, he's not going to have it survive for a turn, or he probably is not optimistic about it surviving for a turn, even though Eric actually, as it turns out, doesn't have a ton of removal in hand. So Paul's probably going to try to make other plays first and only play the morph once he can flip it in the same turn, because getting back the 2 Death Mist Raptors is one of the ways for him to get back into the game.
All right, well, Death Mist Raptor takes down Jace, and Eric gets to untap here. This could be a big turn for him. He's got a lot of options. One of them is Monastery Mentor plus Gideon.
Yeah, and Paul is leaving up Dromoka's command, so being able to deal with either the Soulfire Grandmaster or the Monastery Mentor most likely, since that's the card I think he cares about the most.
Is that going to change Eric's decision path here?
I mean, he's got to be aware of it, but he still might just run Mentor into Gideon this turn and end up pretty happy with the result.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, even if he decides not to do that, then he could still lose the Soulfire Grandmaster, which is an important card in the late game as well. So here comes a trigger.
Paul deciding now whether he wants to use Death Mist Raptor or not. Monastery Mentor is going up to a 3/3, so you don't actually have to command Death Mist if you're going to put a ++1 counter on it yet. You can wait, because even if the Gideon emblem hits, you can just do it in response. So either way, the Mentor isn't going to be big enough to take out the Raptor. And Eric's going to be content to attack for 6 and then use the 0 ability of Gideon.
And here comes that Dromoka's command. And it is, in fact, the Monastery Mentor that's going to fall to the Death Mist Raptor there. But still, Eric, I think, was pretty keenly aware that that could happen, and he likes his spot.
And Paul's still a little short of playing and using the Hidden Dragon Slayer, but between Jace and his draw step, he's found 2 more lands. So next turn, he can, if he wants to go down that route, he can play Lumbering Falls this turn. Next turn, play Dragon Slayer and morph it, and then unmega morph it. He also good company this turn. It looks like Paul's just off that plan.
Yeah.
Paul's one-of creatures have looked pretty good this game. He's been able to turn them into cards
He
very
discarded
efficiently.
both of them, yeah.
Well, Jace is great for that. It's good to play situational cards in a deck with discard like Jace, because it lets you, when the situation is right for those cards, use them, but when it's not, you can cash them in for a new card. So Paul going up to 5 lands here. Looks like he's going to cast another Dromoka's Command. Oh, and then he's going to kill Gideon. He's going to Dromoka's Command away, probably the Monk, and then Reflector Mage. Yeah, just kill both the tokens and then kill Gideon with the Death Mist Raptor.
It's a productive turn here for Paul.
Yeah, and he can actually put the counter on the Reflector Mage.
He's going to do that, and he's going to have the Death Mist Raptor fight. It's already 4 power, so down goes Gideon, and he passes the turn back. So Paul Rietzl fighting the good fight here. He's still got a lot to deal with if you look at the hand of Eric Froehlich with 5 or 6 cards in it, though. He doesn't seem to have a ton in there. He just drew a Kalitas, though.
Kalitas is good. Eric really just wants to draw removal.
Removal, right?
But Eric has a Jace, so Eric can just go. He can just go land, Kalitas, Jace, Soulfire Grandmaster, and then next turn be set up really well.
Pretty good hand, or a pretty good turn.
Because he has that dig through time, so if the Jace survives, he gets to cast dig.
The one in the yard down there?
Yeah, and then Paul is going to be unable to. Oh wow! So Eric is just attacking. Interesting. So he's just going to kill the Jace. He's trading a Soulfire Grandmaster for a Jace here and getting 2 life. And then I would imagine just to see a flurry of creatures here. And that leaves Eric with a number of pretty potent threats. Because, look, even if Paul kills Eric's Jace, next turn Eric has a Soulfire Grandmaster and a Kalitas and a ton of mana. So if he's able to...
Nice turn there from Eric Froehlich. He just...
that was a legendary turn even.
Spews a bunch on the table.
Yeah, even if the Jace dies, Eric, if he draws any spell, the Soulfire Grandmaster is going to start going off. Eric has 8 lands in play and a 9th in his hand. So at some point, he's going to be able to go activate Soulfire Grandmaster, play my spell. Like, imagine if Eric draws Murderous Cut or Fiery Impulse, he just goes off.
Right, and Paul's only real way to kill a Jace is Dromoka's Command, right? Like, that's the only way he can, like, reach out and...
Oh, wow, Paul just instantly passed back. He just played Lumbering Falls and passed.
That can't be good news for Paul Rietzl.
No, because once Eric casts Dig Through Time, it's going to be so hard for him to miss here. Eric deciding whether he wants to discard Bloodstained Mire, Flooded Strand, or Mystic Monastery.
Yeah, he drew a Monastery.
He's probably got to be running out of fetchable lands here, because he's got 1 of each basic and then a total of 5 battle lands, and he's got
I guess no swamp.
4 battle lands in play and 3 basics in play. So yeah, Eric is getting close to the point where he does not have many targets left to fetch.
And here's that Dig Through Time. Small correction there from Rietzl.
So Eric opting to dig before casting the Monastery Mentor in his hand. So I think he's just looking to play multiple spells this turn. Well, Crackling Doom's a great one, and then I imagine Gideon's the second option. Crackling Doom with a Kalitas in play is just really good. And Soulfire Grandmaster is just really good. So,
Crackle, crackle.
and I don't think Flooded Strand can actually get anything right now. So that means that, oh, it can get the second Prairie Stream. Okay, so if Eric hasn't discarded the Prairie Stream, then he could use Flooded Strand in order to play Gideon here. Or he's just going to play Gideon first.
Still would have to get that Prairie Stream if he wants to play Crackling Doom.
And Eric's going to play conservatively. He's worried about Paul playing Collected Company if he attacks. Little does he know Paul just has Abounding Crisis instead, which is not going to be quite as intimidating. Oh yeah, and the dig should be exiled. Though it's in Eric's graveyard right now.
That's true. Yeah, we'll let them know on the floor that the dig through time should be exiled.
I suspect Eric's going to be fine this game, despite that fact.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it is good practice.
Rules are rules.
All right, there is the Collected Company.
Right off the top there for Rietzl, and it's going to resolve as well. So let's see what he finds. fix that problem. Let's see what Rietzl hits with the Collected Company here.
And even if he hits Reflector Mage to bounce like Kalidas or maybe the Soulfire Grandmaster, Eric has a ton of great options here. Den Protector, Collecting Company, unfortunately not the biggest combo. It is depending on which order you play the cards.
Yes, but hitting it off of it, not so great. He did hit a Reflector Mage as well. He's going to bounce Kalidas with it.
So Eric, if he casts the Crackling Doom in response, he gets a zombie, which is a pretty big reason to do so. Even though he's got a Soulfire Grandmaster and to some extent waiting to like activate Soulfire Grandmaster, then play Crackling Doom on his next turn is appealing. I think getting the free zombie seems like it's going to be pretty good, especially since you can potentially then Emblem Gideon next turn and attack with a ton of creatures. Eric even gains 2 off Soulfire Grandmaster here. And Paul's going to attack now, and a reason to attack now from Paul is even though Eric's played a spell, so he has prowess, this does force Eric to trade off creatures before the Gideon Emblem comes down. And Eric's just trading off 2 tokens for
you can see the
creatures.
board state from Eric. He's got 2 active Planeswalkers and a Soulfire Grandmaster to go with his tokens here. And even though this game has gone on for quite a while, it's never really felt like Froehlich was behind at any point here.
No, I mean, there was a turn or two where it looked like Froehlich might have stalled out. Like, if the turn where Eric played Jace and the Jace died and Eric didn't draw a spell, that could have been a turning point. But I don't think that this game is going to last very long.
No, it looks like Gideon's getting in the red zone here, and that is a lethal attack for Eric Froehlich. So Eric's going to take game 1. Mainly Monastery Mentor and Painful Truth, right? That really was what propelled Eric into the mid and late game with an advantage over Rietzl, who, again, I mean, Rietzl had a reasonable draw there. He played, I think, 3 Collected Companies over the course of that game, and it just wasn't enough.
Yeah, part of the problem was that even though Rietzl made a little bit of headway, he was just reacting the whole game to that burst of Mentor tokens, and that meant that he was never really threatening Eric's life total. Eric always had like a Soulfire Grandmaster in play, and then that just made it a lot harder for Paul to seriously look like he was going to be able to end the game. As the longer the game went on, Eric had a ton of cards that would just win him the game immediately. It always feels so great. Look at Eric's doing. He's taking out Duresses because they're not great in the matchup. Paul's playing 30 creatures, but in game 1 he got to snag a company with Duress, and it always feels great to end up using a card in game 1 well and then boarding it out, even because it's not a great card in the matchup overall.
For sure.
And looking at the sideboard, Eric has more copies of Kalidas, which is a great combo with Radiant Flames, which also seems good against a deck full of 3/3s and 2/3s. And then Dragonlord Silumgar,
he has
which
3 Radiant Flames too.
Well, you know, I like Dragonlord Silumgar against white-green base decks to begin with, but when they have 4 Reflector Mages, it's a lot less appealing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've seen, watching Paul play this deck even this morning. In the last round, we got to see him play it as well. And it definitely plays better when he's able to apply pressure, when he can use his Bounding Krasis and his Reflector Mages to, keep his opponent off of good blockers and while creating a nice big board state. He can kind of do the get ahead, stay ahead thing. But when his opponent plays Monastery Mentor, it makes it pretty tough.
Paul has a copy of Silk Wrap in his sideboard, which I would imagine he would bring in to deal with Mentor and Jace. This is where I think he wishes he had more of those. Other than that, he could bring in Valor Stance if he thinks that Eric's going to lean on Kalidas harder. Because this is getting to the point where these players might have enough knowledge of the opponent's deck list to have even more informed decisions.
Paul just has the 1 Valor Stance, the 1 Silk Wrap, right? I mean, he could bring them in, but it's not going to be like a game changer.
Ooh, we've got some Tennos.
Oh yeah, these are actually, I believe, our last 2 undefeated players. We had 5 coming in from overnight.
And Mark Jacobson looks like he's going to continue to be undefeated here, given that he has 2 Hardened Scales and untaps with a Mana Gorger Hydra. So that's going to be a pretty big turn. Like Nissa, if you Nissa minus, Hydra ends up as a 10/10, and if you Nissa make a plant, it's still a 7/7. Though he is on all forests. He can't cast the white card in his hand.
All right, let's jump back over. It looks like they're underway again. Paul Rietzl versus Eric Froehlich. We'll keep an eye on that one as it unfolds for us, but we don't want to miss any of this. These players play quite quickly, too.
Yeah, I think Paul had a turn which took less than 3 seconds. Like, he just knew he was going to do anything, so he just untapped, drew, played a land, and passed.
Yeah. And there's Death Mist Raptor now for Rietzl. It's the first spell of the game.
That's one of the features, I guess, of Bant Company. It's pulled in the direction of having all threes, because when you collect a company and you hit 2 3-drops, you're getting the most value out of your card. That does mean that a lot of the time you just go, land, go, land, 3-drop, which Eric loves to see that. We saw Eric lose a game against Dobzon where it was like Warden of the first tree activated, Sylvan Advocate, like a fast start. Turn 3 Death Mist Raptor is just not that much pressure. If you're not getting into combat with it, it's just a trained Armadon. It's a 3-mana 3/3.
Sure.
Or I should say Nessian Courser to go with a more recently printed card.
Much appreciated.
Or perhaps Gorilla Pack to go with the Ice Age staple.
But is Armadon 1 GG?
Armadon is 1 GG.
Yeah, so we should probably stick with that.
Unfortunately for Paul, 1 Armadon isn't GG, so he's not going to be able to finish this game with just the Death Mist.
No. Though Froehlich hasn't actually played his spell yet this game.
Yeah, but I think he's going to actually go for it here. If he just plays Kalidas and then hopes it doesn't get Reflector Maged, he can then next turn Radiant Flames, make 2 zombies. And even if Paul does Reflector Mage it, then okay, fine, Radiant Flames, kill your 3 creatures.
Sure. Yeah, that seems really good.
And Paul does have the Reflector Mage. He also has Stratus Dancer. I love that card, by the way. Stratus Dancer is a really sweet card. So
5U, put Kalidas back in your hand. And again, these players play very quickly. It's nice.
Yeah, I love it.
I like it too.
I intentionally play very slowly when I'm on camera.
Do not.
I don't.
No land drop there for Rietzl.
No. And so Rietzl's really hoping to draw land next turn to follow up with a collected company, but Eric actually has the Disdainful Stroke. So this is going textbook according for Eric.
Yeah, Eric Froehlich really firing on all cylinders. He does that exactly that you mentioned. Okay, fine, you got rid of Kalidas. I can't play it this turn. I'm going to Radiant Flames away your board.
So Paul passing in order to play Bounding Crassus instead of playing a face-down Stratus Dancer. Paul also has a Dispel in his hand, which is generally good against a deck with like Dig Through Time, Murder's Cut, Fiery Impulse. You're not really getting too much of a mana advantage. This isn't like dispelling, collected companies or Ojutai's commands, but it still trades in a way that's good for Paul.
Yeah, those are still important spells. Oh, it's going to be Gideon here.
So Eric's playing Gideon over playing Kalidas. That matches up not as well against this play.
Right.
But I think Eric doesn't want to get Reflector Maged again.
Especially as Paul's missing land drops here.
So the Krasis takes Gideon down to 1. Doesn't kill Gideon though. So now Eric's got to be pretty happy about this situation.
Yeah, Eric's at 8.
Oh, Fiery Impulse is really good too. So now
He
Eric
can play Kalidas and Fire
he can
Impulse here?
he can play Kalidas. Fire Impulse won't actually kill
it's not spell mastered yet, is it?
the Bounding Krasis, but if Eric's able to play that Disdainful Stroke in hand, it will be. And even just having Kalidas plus 2 Gideon tokens in play is pretty good.
Yeah.
So Paul has his own Disdainful Stroke.
Disdainful Stroke, though.
Well, that was, Paul picked that up over the last turn or two maybe, and that was likely better than a land because dealing with Kalidas is really important.
Now he really would love to hit a land. Instead he found yet another Reflector
Yeah,
Mage.
this
He's got
kills
2
both
in his
tokens
hand.
essentially.
Yeah.
Though Eric may, after blocking, he could Fire Impulse here. One reason not to, though, is Eric has a Monastery Mentor in hand, so he does get to make a Mentor token if he waits. But if he casts the Impulse now, he does get to kill the Bounding Krasis. So
Is he going to have Spell Mastery for sure?
he's not, but he already chumped with the token, so...
Yeah, no, I know he can kill it now, but I'm saying if he waits,
Oh,
will
no,
he for sure be
he's
able
not.
to kill it
That's
this
the
year?
problem.
Yeah.
If he did have Spell Mastery for sure, then it would be a pretty easy call. I think
He did decide to wait.
I think the fact that if you draw a spell, it's very rewarding. Makes sense. Eric's actually drawn a bunch of land in a row. This could be turning around.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Because Rietzl has another Reflector Mage. So if he plays Reflector Mage, if Eric wants Gideon to live, he has to cast the Fiery Impulse in response there.
Get himself a monk.
Yeah, to get a monk.
That would effectively blank the attack from Rietzl, or at least limit it to one of the creatures. This is interesting.
It would make it so Rietzl could not attack with both unless he wanted to risk losing Krasis. He's just going to attack instead. So Eric, I think, is going to have to cast the Fiery Impulse here.
And then block with the Knight. Or the monk.
Well, the thing that's awesome about this is that
Oh.
Eric still gets a monk, and his mentor's a 3/3, so he can just block the Reflector Mage with a 3/3 mentor now.
Yeah, that seems good.
And double block the Bounding Crisis with the 2/2 and a 1/1. This actually worked out, I think, quite well for Eric.
Yeah, it did.
Like, in terms of what could have happened this turn, this was on the high side because Eric traded Impulse and essentially a 2/2 because he got the 1/1 by casting the Impulse for Paul's 2 creatures, which could have gone much more poorly.
Yeah, now he still has the Monastery Mentor and active Gideon.
So Eric's in a spot where he's got all lands in play, a land and a Disdainful Stroke in hand, but if he draws any good spell, imagine if he draws a Painful Truce or
Painful
Addictive
Truce,
Times.
ugh.
Like, the game is going to be a complete swing if he does.
But the truth is he doesn't have that right now, right?
Yeah, and that is painful because he's just looking for any spell.
So let's see if he finds it here.
Well, Jace
what
is
was
not
that?
Jace is not the end of the world because there's a pretty good chance it survives. And Paul doesn't have an attacker in play, which means your Gideon's going to survive for at least another turn, and Eric's just going
He's just going to
for
beat.
7.
Yeah. He still has that Disdainful Stroke in his hand as well in case Paul ever hits his 4th land, which he still hasn't done.
Which is funny.
He
Well,
draws it now, but
he did. It's a tap
tapped,
land.
yeah.
It's funny because Paul's probably sitting there thinking, like, I just need to draw a 4th land so I can cast this company. And Eric's probably thinking, like, I hope you draw your 4th land so you can cast a company.
Right. It's funny. It's very rare that both players' wishes align, but they are here.
Well, that's just because there's incomplete information.
Yeah.
So, you know, both like in this case, Ifro has a little bit more information than Paul does about the status of collected company,
Right.
the card on the stack.
Its ability to resolve.
So when both players want the same thing, one of the players is wrong. Not because they made a mistake, but because the information they have doesn't let them know that it's not going to turn out the way they want. So Paul did find the 4th land, and I think he's incentivized to cast company, and this is just perfect for Eric.
Yeah.
Because he gets a monk token out of this.
Yeah, totally.
And he blanks Paul's turn. And, you know, Eric could actually deal lethal next turn depending on what he draws. It would be difficult, but it's not.
Put a draw spell into a couple of spells. He found
Oh, a
another
Gideon emblem. So the problem is he can't make an emblem to pump the Gideon in play.
Does that transgress the mind?
Yeah, so let's see. If he casts 2 transgresses, Gideon's 5, the monk is 8, the mentor is 10. So I don't think Eric has. Oh wait, no, the Gideon is 12. If Eric has enough mana, I think he can just play second Gideon to just trigger prowess to actually deal enough damage. Because he pluses Gideon, so he's a 5/5. He plays Transgress, he flashes back Transgress, and then he plays Gideon as just a spell, so it's 3 spells. So the Mentor is a 5, -2 is 3, and the Monk's a 4, so that's 9. I think that's 12. That actually would be lethal.
It would be, but he didn't do it. So he's just going to take a slower line here, take out
I mean, I
Jace.
think Eric's huge favorite this game, but it is kind of funny that it looks to me, unless I'm missing something, like he actually would have had exactly enough to finish off Paul.
It's funny.
And Paul's looking at Eric's graveyard to figure out what Jace is going to get back next turn, and I don't see if Paul coming out of this. It's not often that you cast Gideon as a shock, which is essentially what it would have been.
It would have been +2.
Paul playing a Stratus Dancer, but yeah, unfortunately he's only human. He's not going to be able to finish this off. He's got just 1 blocker against Eric's now 4 attackers, and Eric's going to be able to Jace. Paul can flip the Stratus Dancer and counter the removal spell, but that still triggers prowess to the point where Eric should be able to attack for enough.
Eric wanting to know exactly what's in the graveyard there for Paul. He's got 1 Deathmist Raptor down there. Just wants to make sure he doesn't run into a disaster.
And he's probably not playing around Stratus Dancer because that's a card that you're unlikely to really think of here.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, here we're seeing Gideon trigger emblem, and then
Rietzl's like, yeah, that's a lot of triggers. It's all happening. And are they coming in the red zone? They are.
So Paul blocks the mentor.
And takes.
Yeah, and it looks. He's played 2. He's played 2 spells. It looks like
That's lethal then.
Yeah. and then he +1, and then he
He's got an
did a
emblem.
Gideon emblem, which is not on the board right now.
Right, but he does have one. There it is. And that's going to do it. Eric Froehlich defeats Paul Rietzl in 2 good games, and these guys are very good friends. You can see the smile from Rietzl after he takes his 2nd loss of the tournament. Still at a healthy 9-2 though, as we hit the midway point of day 2. Eric Froehlich 10-1.
Yeah.
Looking to run it up.
Yeah, Monastery Mentor really just did a number on Paul Rietzl's Bant Company deck. Paul didn't hit his 4th land for a long time that game, but the fact that Eric has Kalidas and Monastery Mentor, which are both pretty big threats, that's a pretty big deal.
All right, let's take a look at Carlos Rodriguez. He's playing against Andrew Cuneo here.
Oh, and Andrew's actually playing a Dark Jeskai as well.
Yeah, it does look like it. And is this Black-Red Dragons here for Carlos?
Looks like it. And he's got an Ob Nixilis in play, which, well, combined with the fact that he also has twice as many lands in play as Andrew, does make things look a little tough.
Yes.
But Andrew has a Jason 7, and
doesn't look like it slowed him down. Look at his graveyard.
yeah, Andrew's been playing a bunch of stuff. Problem is, Ob Nixilis drawing 2 cards a turn when you're not pressuring your opponent's life total makes things difficult.
Yes, indeed. That Flamewake Phoenix looks like it has 2 counters on it. Or is that a signifier that it's been
I think that's
shrunk by
getting
Jace
jaced. I don't think it gets counters, so I think that
Yeah.
players are both just signifying that it got jaced down to a 0-2, which,
is one way to do it.
yeah, it's not confusing at all for coverage, is what I like it.
I liked Eric's way a little better. He,
There we go. See, look, Cuneo has our back.
yeah.
Chat's still deconstructing the 12 damage line I had from Eric's turn. I'm pretty sure I'm right, though. 3 spells, 5/5 Mentor, 3/5 Mentor because of Jace, 4/4 Monk, 5/5 Gideon. Looks like 12 to me. It could be commentator lethal, but I think it is actually lethal. I think it's like also actual lethal.
I thought of that earlier. Thunderbreak Regent now for Carlos.
The Flamewake does have to tap itself because it must attack even as a 0-2.
Indeed.
Cracking Doom, still one of the best ways to get rid of Thunderbreak Regent,
Yeah,
does not trigger the ability.
It's also going to take Ob Nixilis from 6 to 4 loyalty here.
Do you think Andrew's going for a Jace Ultimate here?
No.
I'm going to ask you that every time a Jace gets really
Yeah, I
big. I've lost a Jace Ultimate before, in tournaments even. It can happen. Andrew just on all spells in hand, but he's got Disdainful Stroke. Oh, Duress.
Here's a Duress. Now that's a full grip though for Andrew.
Yeah,
so
Duress is a beating though because Andrew has 6 cards in hand. Only one of them can be cast at instant speed. It's just the Disdainful Stroke. He was really hoping to be able to use that this turn. Though actually, you can't cast any other spells. You can't cast Mantis Rider at his current lands. He's got.
He can.
He's got 2 red
effectively
lands.
double red. Yeah.
So now,
Oh, that's awkward.
now that Carlos takes Disdainful Stroke, he knows the way is clear for like Kolagon the Storm's Fury,
Uh-oh.
and that actually makes the Flamewake even a little bit bigger too.
Yep.
So could attack for 6. He has 6 damage. You can put Jace down to 2, or you can put Andrew down to 10. Which Planeswalker do you attack here? They're both quite powerful.
I think I like just attacking Cuneo.
Yeah, Jace is. Well, Jace can flash back Crackling Doom, but Carlos, because he dashed the Kolagon, he doesn't
Right.
actually have to worry about it quite yet. He can maybe have another Duress next turn before he exposes it to removal.
Okay, Cuneo does find that land. Unfortunately,
It's a
gonna
sunken
be
hollow.
tapped this time. Yeah.
And it doesn't even provide white mana. Like, he's actually looking for a land that can provide white to play something like Gideon, but just Ob Nixilis is just acting as a personal howling mine for Carlos. He's drawing 2 cards a turn. It's gonna be. It's hard for a control deck to keep up with that. And so even though the Red Black Dragons deck, sometimes it has trouble in games where the opponent just kills its creatures because it's just like an all removal all creatures deck. Ob Nixilis draws so many extra cards that you can actually just power through it.
He's going to start off with Thopter Engineer here. And then he's going to add the Kolagon to the board as well.
Yeah, which just is
And
a
the
ton of
Thopter has
damage.
haste as well thanks to the Thopter Engineer. So this is just a huge chunk of
8 points of damage. You can take Cuneo down to 2. And then that just also means that like Carlos has a Draconic Roar in hand. If
Yeah.
Cuneo ever plays a creature, then Draconic Roar plus a dragon is enough.
This is game 3 as well, so it looks like Cuneo's going to pick up his 2nd loss of the tournament here, propelling Carlos Rodriguez up to 10-1.
Yeah.
And the handshake. So nice work, Carlos. It's a tall order beating Andrew Cuneo, but him stuck on 3 lands forever, and you with the Obnixla certainly got the job done. Big smile there from Carlos. Cuneo still in good shape here, though, at 9-2, though much more precarious position than he just was. This tournament was quite big. You're going to need a very solid record to make top 8 here.
Yeah, and in my experience, it's better to win the round than lose your round.
Right.
In order if you want to make top 8.
Hard-hitting commentary, Louise.
I like to consider myself the John Madden of Magic commentary.
All right, that's going to do it for round 11 here from Houston.